Hey, good morning, everybody. It's your favorite host, Tim and Tim. We're back on another Tuesday episode of the Tim Show, Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Eastern. How you doing, Tim? Good morning.
Hey man, not too bad. Can't complain.
Hey, living the vida loca?
Yeah,
No?
yeah, yeah, man. Living the loco life for sure.
Well, hey, good morning, everybody. We're happy that you're back with us today, and we wanted to talk about this week. How kind of have the negotiations and interactions with brokers changed over the last couple of months? 6 to 12 months, really. I mean, there's been a significantly more change over the last like 3 months. So we're just going to talk about what we're seeing and how those transactions are looking and how the conversations are going. And you know, now, we're not saying that this is the right or wrong way to negotiate or the right or wrong way to have a conversation with a broker. But we are saying is this is what we're experiencing and these are how the conversations are going. And we're just putting it out there so you can see, from our side, we're being transparent about what everything looks like in the day-to-day life of a multifamily syndicator. We're always constantly doing broker outreach and market outreach in order to get new deals and have a pulse on the market and understand what's going on in the market, with debt and with sellers and investors. And there's always so much information to talk about because it's constantly changing. So we thought it'd be a good time to talk about those exact things. So,
Yeah.
Tim, anything you want to add to that I missed?
No, just let's get into it, man. Because I mean, there's so many examples for so many different reasons of why things have started to change. I think seller expectations are starting to come around. They're still a little slow. They're still a little slow. I think some folks, as I'm talking to people, I think some folks are still holding out hope that interest rates stabilize or start to drop, and that's going to help them out. But at the end of the day, guys, expectations need to change. And personally, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to say I watched a YouTube video last night by Mark Moss about how the BLS, I don't remember what that acronym stands for, but it has to do something with the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, that they changed the way that inflation is calculated in order to make it artificially seem like inflation is less than it actually is. So now, again, like I haven't done any research on these articles, but he was sharing articles that were published on the website. So it was an interesting video to go back and watch. But he was talking about how at its peak, inflation was like 9.1% in like June or July or something like that. And then it's come down to about 9%. I mean, sorry, it came down from 9.1 to about 6.5%, low 6% range as of like the end of December. And he's estimating now that the way that they changed the CPI inflation index is going to make it so that come March, the inflation is going to be back down to a 2 to 3%, just because of the way that they changed it. And I thought it was bullshit, right, at the end of the day. But what he did was he found this organization or this group that calculated inflation over the same calculation methods or whatever that were done, in the 80s. And I forget exactly, it was like called the shopping cart method or something like that. And he said that inflation today is based on the way that they used to calculate it in the 80s. Inflation is really like upper in the 15 to 16% range. So why am I talking about that? It's really interesting to me because if inflation is going to get back down to where the Fed wants at this 2 to 3% range in the next 60 days, we were estimating that rates were going to kind of level out or stay the same or do whatever. But Mark Moss's theory is that if inflation is back down to 2 or 3%, and even if it goes a little bit below that, because they're still anticipating a Fed rate hike in February of 25 basis points, they're going to have deflation instead of inflation. And then they're going to have to print more money and make rates lower in order to combat it. And it was a really interesting thought process. And I was just amazed with how much control they have over calculating the inflation rate based on a calculation that they can change at their own, without Supreme Court approval or anything like that. So
So
how is
Tim,
that going to change rates
was that
and conversations?
Was that new calculation? You mentioned the 80s and today. Was that new calculation something they did recently, or was this back in the 80s
Yes,
when they
they
redid it?
just did it, like, this month.
Mm.
So, the information hasn't been wildly so I don't know who Facebook user is here, but yeah, he watched it last week too, modifying the CPA to make it appear that it's going down effectively, but it's kind of bullshit. And it's really interesting because like, the biggest topic of conversations with brokers and sellers and investors right now are all interest rates, and it's all tied to inflation, and what is the Fed gonna do based on inflation? And it really is going to change the trajectory of 2023 if they artificially changed the calculation and made the rates lower or the inflation rates lower. They're going to start, we're going to see like a supercharge again in values of prices and homes and commercial assets or whatever, everything across the board.
Yeah, and guys, if you're not familiar, I don't know the exact percentage off my top of my head, but one of the reasons home prices and housing prices are so critical is because they make up a large majority of the inflation number.
Hmm.
Housing is a huge, huge component to that. So while we're seeing things like price of used cars drop, price of new cars drop, that's starting to come back to realistic levels. You may even see supply chain opening back up and things like that. Housing is still really high.
Hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I like that. I don't want to see them drop. I do want to see some normalcy come back to the market. I do want to see some some rules of thumb and some best practices come back and find their way into how we look at things. I welcome that. I want it back. Because one of the things that we've seen, especially over the last couple of years, and this comes into what we're talking about with negotiation. One of the things we've seen is like rules of thumb just really haven't applied in the last
Gone.
couple of years. They've been thrown out the window. Debt was so low that you didn't need that 1-to-1 rent to price ratio, right? You could make deals work without that. And then, but hey, guess what? Shit happens, and all of a sudden, interest rates started going up outside of the rule of thumb, right? Like they went up way faster than what you would typically underwrite to. Well, guess what? Deals don't work anymore.
Mm.
And you can't refinance. You were expecting 3.5% to make the deal work 3 years later. Well, you're not getting it.
Yeah.
And so that makes things really hard. And that does play into what we're talking about here with negotiations, because there's a whole lot of reasons why deals are starting to show up on the market right now, and it has almost nothing to do with cap rates. There's a lot of reasons out there that have nothing to do with cap rates why you're going to start to see, and why you are already starting to see deals come on the market.
Yeah, one of the interesting conversations that we've had with lending brokers, not even just like selling, like this is a very broad stroke of brokers. I mean, it's insurance brokers, lending brokers, commercial brokers across the board, right? We're covering a wide range topic today. Is that some of the lending broker conversations have been that the debt markets are still so tight because people are extending their bridge loans or extending rates and for extent, they're exercising those extensions, and the banks know that they have those extensions out there. But I don't know what the percentage is, but I would say the vast majority of people would never exercise those extensions. They would just refinance and go
Yeah.
into stabilized debt and whatever. But because of rates being where they are and people needing to buy more time, those lenders that would traditionally be your bridge lenders putting out short-term loans are not able to do that because they don't have the liquidity to do it, because
Right.
people are not refinancing their properties, which makes it harder for people to buy stuff because they're using extensions, but it's also limiting the supply on the market right now in terms of deals and money.
Yeah. Yeah. Really good point, Tim. So, it's making so and that by itself too is also helping bring expectations down a little bit, because you think about that. You got guys who are out there, and some of them are exercising extensions, some of them are having a hard time continuing to make their deals work, right? They
Hmm.
were expecting a refi at this time. Now the ones that are doing okay are the ones who are hitting the numbers they thought they'd hit. They were cash flowing before today. They were cash flowing before their rents went up 200 or 300 bucks a month, that type of thing. So they're doing okay. They can hold on to the properties. They just can't go get the 4 and 4.5% interest rate that they were expecting to get. Right. So they're not able to refi, so they're working with their lenders. The guys that are struggling are the ones who are still either in a break even or even a negative cash flow situation, even after doing the $200 and $300 rent bumps. And that's causing some deals to show up, right? That's causing some, I, I can't continue to service this loan. I can't go get new debt. I got to sell, right? So that's causing some deals to show up. One of the other things I'm seeing show up that I've seen some examples of are partnerships that are stressed. Because partnerships are easy, right, Tim? When the sun's shining and everything's great and the money's flowing in. When times get a little tough and supply is disrupted, interest rates are hard to get. You're not hitting your targets. Partnerships get stressed. They and quite honestly, guys, they fall apart. And
Hmm.
so you're seeing some people. I know of a couple of deals right now that are on the market, can be had for a discount because the partners just need to get out. They want to get out.
Yep.
So you're starting to see some of that rear its ugly head. And it's really unfortunate, guys. I'm not pulling for that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not pulling for that at all. But
It's just, it is what it is.
but it's happening.
Right.
And we're starting to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the other things that I've found interesting is when a broker, like a listing broker, has an opportunity that's off market and they're calling me and they're like, hey, we don't have an OM. It's just a T12, blah, 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 blah. And I literally stop him in his track and I was like, if you're not asking me to pay in place cash flow divided by the market cap rate, I'm not buying it unless they're willing to do some kind of seller financing. And that made that 30-minute phone call a quick 5-minute phone call of like, oh, actually, I'm not going to waste your time. These guys want, you know, let's call it 100K a door and the rents are 750 and pro forma rents are 900. I was like, no way, dude. Like, sure, if you want to take whatever their current income is, apply the 5.5% cap market cap rate, I'll buy that right now. Like, no question. I don't even need to underwrite it because I know it can add value to it and make money, but I'm not going to go and save these people from their bad deals because they're in loan situations that they can't get out of. And I'm okay with not doing deals. I'm okay with
Yeah.
sitting and watching and waiting, and I will be very selective because opportunity cost is more important to me. And if I waste my time doing a deal that I have to make work with a lot of effort, with a lot of creativity, with whatever, then I could lose an opportunity of something that is that I do have the ability to buy on in place cash flow or has a seller financing aspect, which is going to be far worth my time rather than trying to scrape pennies together to make some other deals work.
Yeah, and guys, Vitale brings up a really good point there because don't get us wrong, over the last couple of years, we've certainly bought deals where we needed to get creative, right? Like we saw something in the business plan that we knew we could make work, so we had to get creative. And we're working on those, and they're fine, but we're working through them, and those things are in process now. But that's not today, right? Like there's plenty of opportunity right now that's coming down the pipe that doesn't need that creativity. It's just true, you know, expense versus income, NOI, in place cash flow, and what's the value add strategy, right? Like
Hmm.
that's we're not having to be as creative today.
Yeah.
I know of plenty of deals right here in my own market now that, quite frankly, weren't available a year ago, hell, 6 months ago. And they're starting to come around.
Hmm.
We're starting to see people who are like, this one, I don't want to do this one. I'm going to sell it and I'm going to go over here and do this. And to get out of this one over here, it's coming at a bit of a discount, or it's coming at something that's way more reasonable than what we saw in mid 2022, early 2022.
Yeah. I mean, it's still early in the year. I mean,
Sure.
don't jump the gun and be like, "Oh my God, it's January 24th. I haven't bought a deal yet. My whole year's over." No, like you're fine. Like there's still so much time for this to develop and change and grow. And that's why it's like why we started off this show where I was talking about what I'm doing in my off time when I'm not like behind the desk, when I'm not on phone calls and stuff. Like I'm watching YouTube videos about inflation and what's going on in the regulations and politics and all that kind of stuff because it helps me make decisions for myself and for my investors going into this very turmoil time period. So be educated, stay on top of all this information. We like to talk about this stuff and we invite you to invite, talk with us on these and like provide comments and stuff like that. But I mean, that's why we love this StreamYard setup, is because we can interact with the audience and get some feedback about the things that we're talking. And we want to hear from you too. Like, we want to hear, like, what are you guys experiencing and how are your experiences different from ours? Whether it's the way that we're having conversations or the way that you're seeing deal flow, or like maybe you have different access to lenders or something like that. There's so much information here that can go out and that we can share together as like a group, like, the Facebook group and Making Moves group, and work together in order to find success. Because like what Tim was saying earlier, is we don't want to see anybody fail, but
No.
it is what it is. Like, people they do bad underwriting, they make bad assumptions, they compressed. This is a funny one. I had a deal sent to me in a market that I already own a property in, and the underwriting was spot on. And I was like, I can't understand. Like, and I was amazed because it was from a broker. The underwriting was spot on. The insurance was a little low. And I was like, we'll change this because I own this in the area and this is what we're currently paying. So that was wrong. But then he was like, oh, well, you can sell it at a 5.5% cap rate. I was like, what? It's like, no way, man. I just had an appraisal done and it was a 7%. How do you think I'm going to be able to sell it in 2 years at a 5.5? And that completely changed the landscape of the deal. But people, that flies under the radar very frequently, where people aren't paying attention to the things that move the needle in your returns is obviously your debt and your cap rates.
Yeah, really good point, man, and great catch, by the way, on the insurance. But that brings up a really good point, Tim, because there you still see that out there, right? You still see guys out there trying to get a premium price for their product, and hey, if they can, great. I don't want to be the guy that buys it. I just think, folks, I think Tim keyed in on something a while ago called opportunity cost, right? Like, there's going to be a ton of opportunity coming across in 2023, in my personal opinion. As Tim mentioned, a lot of the videos and articles I'm reading seem to agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm betting on it. And part of that bet, yeah, and part of that bet is being patient and waiting for those to come across. And it's not that we're not buying. I think you saw, like, we're doing a triple net deal. That's a really strong deal.
We got two triple net. I got two triple net deals right now, and we're closing on another apartment complex.
Yeah,
and it's not even the end of January. Like, we're still buying stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, and that particular apartment complex, to give you some idea, conservatively, there's probably about a 35% price discount on what the market demands. And it's a great deal. It's a strong deal. That being said, let me talk about one thing, and Tim mentioned this a minute ago. When you're negotiating, here's one of the things to keep in mind. Lending is tough right now. It's really, really tough. And even as good a deal as this one is, it's taking me a while to work through the lending. And, where like a year ago, you probably said, I'm going to go get this interest rate, and the first guy who gives me that interest rate with the least fees or whatever, that's who I'm going with, right? Boom, I'm going.
Yeah. It was like the process took all of 3 to 5 days.
Yeah. Well, I've been working on lending for this one for 2.5 months now, 2.5 months. And it's actually been something that's helping us shift our strategy a little bit. It's like, hey, when I'm doing my rough underwriting, when I'm doing my initial underwriting, I'm going to estimate my interest rates here, like what I think I can get. I'm going to go way up here, 10%, whatever. And then I'm going to try to get lending below that. I'm going to try, right? And it's out there, like, fielding multiple offers, like who can come with what. And, that process is taking longer. You better be estimating high. Don't go, assume 65, 70%. If you get, 65, 70%, if you get 75, awesome. Right. But, you need to make those adjustments right now, and then you need to make sure that you put that into your strategy as well when you're out looking for properties.
Yeah. If you haven't made a conversation with your lending broker in the last like 60 days or 90 days, call them up. Just be like, hey, what's up? Haven't talked to you in a while. What are you seeing in the market? How are things going? How should I adjust or change my underwriting? Like, it's a relationship business. So continue to strengthen those relationships and let them know that you're relevant in the market, and continue to strengthen those skills. The more information that you have, from other professionals that do their job, like lending and insurance and property management and whatever else, right? The more information that you have from them, you continue to exercise that muscle and having confidence and strength in your underwriting. And that is so crucially important when it comes to pitching deals to banks, right? Like you have to pitch the deal to the bank. You have to, prove to them that your business plan is correct because of XYZ. Here's all my data. Here's my information. Their assumptions could be wrong. Like the bank isn't always the bank isn't the is all end all. Pitching deals to investors and like why it's safe or why it's good. I mean, there's so many things that stem from the underwriting. So there's nothing wrong with continuing to spend some time in that aspect.
Yeah. So, and really good point, by the way, of like calling your broker. And I would say call brokers that you haven't talked to as well. Call local lenders that you haven't talked to as well. This is a really good
Yeah.
time to be expanding that network.
Yeah.
Um, Especially with local lenders. I will tell you, at least in my experience, if you guys are out there and you've seen something different, please chime in. But in my experience, at least going through this process, national lenders are a little bit tougher right now. The local lenders who know the market that you're buying in, they're going to be a little bit more amenable towards looking at your deal. So call up those local lenders, be asking around to other folks in your network, your local network, like what lenders they work with,
Mm.
who they've had good experience with. Talk to your real estate broker about that as well. I got a great reference recently from a real estate broker here in the Charlotte area. And I'm having conversations with that lender now.
I actually I want to ask you some questions. What are some of the questions that the lending brokers are asking you that can help people that are listening to this right now be better prepared?
Yeah, a lot of it's about in-place cash flow. I mean, to your point, you're buying on in-place and they're lending on in-place.
Yeah.
So they're they're asking me about my pro forma, but it's really more about where's the property today.
Hmm.
One of the biggest things they are doing, it used to be like, here's your underwriting file, here's all the information. Well, now they're taking it a step further. It's like, hey, I see that your rents in year three are predicted to be here. I want to see I want to see a month by month over the next 36 months of how you plan to get to that number.
Hmm.
So you think about that. I got to say you got a 20 unit property. Well, I want to see every unit month by month on what kind of rent you're going to get at each one of those units for the next 36 months. That's a level of detail they haven't been asking for before. So that's one of the questions that they're asking. Takes a little more time. That kind of goes into that timeline that I was talking about. And then two guys, it's really about, they're really challenging on what's your cap rate assumption. What's your cap rate assumption? And then what interest rate are you shooting for? Right? It's almost like they're
Yeah.
pitching. It's almost like they're pitching me. Like I'm like, man, I'm looking for something
Close
in
you can
seven
get
and
me.
a yeah, I'm looking for something in 7.5, and it's like, it's almost like we're negotiating interest rates now.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas before, it was just kind of like the bankers competing, lenders
Yeah.
competing against each other for who could get the lowest. Now they're kind of like, how hard can I push you? And it's almost like where do you anchor your lender, right?
Well, because I don't know. Obviously not a lending broker. I'm not a bank, right? But from what I understand at this point in time today, is that the rates have continued to gone up with the Fed. Like that's fair. Everyone knows that. But the yield spread between the Fed rate and the bank rate is, I think, around 4% or 4.5% or something like that. So the banks could lend you at 6, 7% on a bridge loan, but they don't because one, they're not going to make as much money. And if the Fed rate continues to go up, they're going to start losing money. They're going to be in an inverse ratio. So
Right.
they're padding in a huge yield between what they can borrow from and what they're going to lend from or lend to in order to make sure that they're going to make money. Now, it kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. It's like once the rates stabilize, then those yields will become tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, and you'll see those interest rates come down. But at this point, right now, today, the spread between what they can borrow at and what they're going to lend to is very big because it's a mitigation of risk on their part, coupled
Yeah.
with they have liquidity problems because people aren't refinancing, they're extending the loans. So they have to be more selective. Just like we're being more selective with what properties we buy, they're looking at opportunity cost and understanding what is going to be the best yield for our money and where can we make the most amount of money with the limited amount of resources that we have. It's a
Yeah.
cat and mouse game. It goes back and forth here, guys. It's not like a one size fits all and that we're in the driver's seat and the banks need us. Well, yeah, the banks do need us and we need them. And it's a tit for tat. And you have to understand their mindset and what their initiatives are in order to make sure you're framing the question correctly and having a good negotiation so that it's a win-win scenario. And just having an understanding of how they calculate risk and profit is going to make it so that you can negotiate better, like what Tim is doing, in order to get the best possible rate for your deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And guys, we talked about something early on, which I would say patience is your friend, right? This is one lesson I learned back in 2008 and 9. Patience and time is your friend, right? Buy yourself time. Because one of the things that we're kind of glossing over here is pin up demand, right? So
Yes.
lenders make money when they lend. Lenders make money when they originate new loans. There's fees associated right with that, right? They need to be doing that. Well, they're not right now. And so what's going to happen is, there's going to be all these refis, there's going to be all these deals coming. Sometime down the road, lenders are going to need to start lending, and they're going to have this period where they haven't been, and they're going to need to make up those numbers, right? So there is going to come a time when they're going to want to be lending, when people are going to want to be refining, and there's going to be all this pent up demand, and people are going to get all hot and ready to go. So one of the things that I would say, you just mentioned it a second ago, while you're being patient, use this time to expand your network. Like, get
Mm.
out there, make lender calls, make lender relationships, even if it doesn't result in a loan today, you know, establish that relationship now so that when things start to heat up and you need that refi and you want that lender's attention, you already got it.
Hmm.
um
That's
so
big.
yeah, be prepared, right? Like, things are going to get hot, things are going to get competitive, things are going to get um and there's going to be opportunity. Be ready to pounce on that opportunity. So use this time where we're all being kind of patient and waiting, use it to shore up some things like Tim's talking about. He's out reading and educating himself on where the market goes, and that's going to come into his strategy on how he looks at things over the next 2 months, 3 months, 8 months from now. So be using this time to kind of educate yourself and expand your network.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a very interesting summer if
Mhm.
if the CPI index, if the CPI calculation was changed and inflation rates really do what this Mark Moss guy is anticipating them to do because of the change of the inflation rates, like those lenders are going to be hot and bothered and ready to lend, come April, May, June, like the second quarter over the summertime, second and third quarters, you're going to see all that pent up demand because there was a lot of banks and a lot of buyers that have been pencils down since like September of last year. And they weren't they weren't lending, they weren't looking at new deals, they weren't buying new deals, they weren't selling. Like there's going to be a lot of pent up demand. There's people using those extensions, and those extensions are going to run out, so they're going to have to get out of deals. Like you could see a huge uptick in transaction volume in the next 90 to 120 days.
Yeah.
So making those phone calls and building those relationships. I mean, half of this information that we're talking about comes from lending brokers and listing brokers and insurance brokers and all of the people that we have conversations with regularly. All of that
Mhm.
information is coming from them and YouTube. Gotta love YouTube University. Like all that information, it's not like I didn't create this information. I didn't like make it up or whatever. Tim Veston either. Like this is all information we're relaying that we're getting from the relationships that we're building. And it behooves you to go do the same so that when you do need something, you can pick up that phone and make a phone call and say, hey, like I'm ready. I need this. I know we've been talking about it for the last couple of months. Like I'm ready to rock. Let's roll.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. 'Cause this is, you know, well, what do they say? Luck, right? Luck's when opportunity and preparation meet, right? So
Yeah, right.
it's
Well,
time
Tim, let's get lucky this year, man, because we
it's
sure got
time to
lucky
start
last
creating
year.
your luck, man. Create your own luck. Start now.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that's all we got for today. We're going to keep it quick and short today, and appreciate you joining in. If you have any feedback on anything that we have going on in the markets, let us know. Like we're always looking to learn. And if anything, we will see you guys next week. See
All
ya.
right, guys, take care.